T-Mobile's unlimited plan costs $95 per month for a smaller network, plus monthly taxes and fees. It's enough to wreck your day. Cricket's unlimited plan gives you a bigger network for $25 less per month, with monthly taxes and fees included. Cricket Wireless, something to smile about.
Download speeds max of 8 megabits per second LTE and 4 megabits per second 4G. Price comparison based on one smartphone line with unlimited plan. Mobile hotspot not available. Activation, other fees and restrictions apply. Coverage not available everywhere. Terms, features, and restrictions subject to change. See store for details.
Blog Talk Radio.
We are the UR Tennis Network. Our mission is to be the voice of tennis. We enlist a team of passionate enthusiasts to promote our sport. We strive to bring interesting perspectives on the many spins of tennis. Our goal is to provide the learners of our sport with current news and information from many angles. We seek active participation from communities interested in tennis, but tennis is not interested in them. We are expanding our outreach. Tennis is a true lifetime sport that needs to be talked about, and the UR Tennis Network pledges to pursue this idea relentlessly.
Good morning and welcome to the Parenting Aces radio show on Blog Talk Radio's UR Tennis Network. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and we are having some bizarre technical issues right now, so I'm not sure what's going on, but I do know that I have my guest, Jeff Rothschild, with us live right now, and Jeff, welcome to the show.
Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Good morning. I'm not sure if we're broadcasting live or if we're just recording for the podcast, but we're going to go ahead and do our thing, and we'll just kind of have to see what happens here. So for those of you who are trying to listen live, I apologize if this is not coming through. For those of you listening to the podcast, hopefully the whole thing is recording. And Jeff, I don't know what to tell you. The internet's a weird place sometimes. So.
Yeah, that's all right.
It's telling me we're going to disconnect in 90 seconds, but I think we're good. And so we're just going to do our thing. So I was going to give a little background about you, Jeff, but since you're with us already, I'm going to let you kind of toot your own horn for a minute and tell our audience about your background. We are going to be discussing nutrition for junior tennis players and I guess a little bit about college players as well. But before we jump in, can you talk about your background in tennis and all of your impressive credentials on the nutrition side?
Sure. Well, played tennis my whole life. So I started playing junior tennis, started competing in junior tennis, and when I was probably about eight or nine, played through all those years. Fast forward, I did my master's degree in nutritional science, and I'm a registered dietitian. While I was doing my master's, I started coaching. I was an assistant college tennis coach for 5 years at Cal State LA. And then since then, I guess this is kind of a quick life story catch up, but since then, being a sports dietitian, I work with a lot of tennis players, excuse me, also some other athletes and also non-athletes, but my biggest interest and focus is tennis as a tennis player, and I still play tennis. So I spend most of my time doing that.
And you are a registered dietitian. You're also a certified trainer. I mean, you've got just this whole alphabet soup behind your name. I have experience as a strength and conditioning specialist, and that's how I first got involved with the college program. I was doing initially just interested in doing the strength and conditioning and the nutrition side of things, but of course, being a tennis player and having such a background in tennis, it was just a really good fit and a real natural fit. So it was a great experience for the 5 years I spent there. That's fantastic. And, for us parents, I mean, the nutrition piece, unless the parents have a background in nutrition, is really tricky. And it changes over the course of our kids' tennis, quote, career. Their needs change as they're training harder and competing harder as they go through puberty and adolescence. It changes again. And then for collegiate players,
there's a whole other set of challenges that those kids face. And so what I'm really hoping for today is to get some concrete advice/information from you that parents can use to make sure that their kids are eating and drinking properly. I'd love to touch on the whole aspect of cramping and the heat, as it's now May and the summer tennis season is getting very close. And cramping is a real issue, especially for players in my section in the South, down in Florida, in Southern California, down in the Southwest. So these are the things I'd love to touch on. And I also want to give you the opportunity to talk about what you're doing and your book and all the other resources that you're providing to coaches and parents out there.
Cool. Yeah. So I guess, we'll start with kind of I guess a couple of things up front. Of course, there's such a wide range when we talk about tennis players, even juniors. The physicality of a 10-year-old versus a 18-year-old. Obviously, there's going to be some big differences. So the amount of energy, that of course that needs to be consumed is going to be different, and then that translates also to what they should be taking in on the court. But we'll start with a broad overview, and then we can get more, I guess, nuanced from there. I think one of the most underappreciated things for all people, but especially junior tennis players or all athletes, junior athletes, is sleep. So even though sleep is not exactly nutrition, it can't have one without the other. Like if you sleep well, it actually affects your hunger, or if you sleep poorly, maybe I should start with the people who sleep poorly. If you don't sleep enough, you're going to be hungrier. You're going to crave sweets. This goes for kids and adults. So, and you're not going to perform as well. So really, I think everyone kind of acknowledges the importance of sleep, but I don't think people quite grasp how much it can affect things. So, for example, even just looking at tennis players, there was a recent study in older teenage British tennis players, and the effects of one night of shortened sleep. So if they're getting 2 hours less sleep than normal, their serving accuracy decreased by about 30%. So being able to hit a target in a serving box.
Wow.
So this is a huge factor, right? So there's people want to know, what should I eat right before I play? But it's very likely that sleep will have a much greater effect on performance, both in the short term and the long term, than even anything you can really eat.
That's
another
interesting. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the implications for the timing of tournament matches should be huge there, right? The
absolutely,
the kid that's on the court till 10 p.m. playing a match, and then has to get something to eat, shower, and get to sleep. So if they're lucky, they're in bed asleep by 11:30, and then, God forbid, they have an 8 a.m. match the next day. They're already behind the 8 ball.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's huge. And for kids, and even at the pro level, you see matches going very late sometimes. Roger Federer is quoted as saying he prefers to sleep 11 to 12 hours per day. So these guys are taking this so seriously. And one other, I'll point out an interesting study at Stanford on the women's tennis team. They had the players extend their sleep, at least the time they spend in bed, to 10 hours per night for 5 to 6 weeks. And getting the extra sleep resulted in just huge improvements in their performance. They were able to sprint faster, improve their serving accuracy, improve their hitting accuracy, all this stuff that again makes you can get so much more. You can gain so much more than just like eating a different thing than from before you play. So with that, like I said, everyone acknowledges that they need to sleep better, but with teenagers, I do work with a number of teenagers, and it can be tricky. And I find there's kind of 2 reasons people don't sleep enough. Well, one, teenagers, their biological clocks are delayed, so they naturally want to go to sleep later and wake up later, as anyone with kids or remembers being a kid will attest to. But again, there's kind of, I find 2 things. Either people are not tired, so if you say go to sleep at 10 or 11, they'll say, well, I'm not tired that early. And then the other thing is I'm just too busy, so I have homework or, work for adults. They have, bills or whatever it is. So those are kind of the two things. So for people that say, I'm just too busy, I have too many things to do at night, I think it's really, really important to prioritize the sleep. So again, that could mean for the teenage athlete, doing your homework at school, not saving it until after dinner, or at least getting as much done if there's like a study hall or something like that, or before tennis, depending on their schedule. I think it's really, really important to prioritize that so that they're not starting homework at 9 o'clock at night or even later. Also then, relating to like not being tired, some simple things that you can do to fall asleep earlier would be just to keep the lights down in your house at night, because it's the light that comes into our eyes that tells us it's daytime effectively, right? So that means light from just light fixtures, that means light from the television, and of course the screen time. So looking at phones, iPads, laptops, when you're looking into those lights, your body is getting the signal that it's daytime, so it should stay up. So simply, there's a few things. So you could dim the screen, dim the lights in your house. If people do have to do work, homework, or whatever, there's a couple things. There's a free download for laptops or for computers called Flux, which many people might be familiar with. You just put it on your computer. It's just Flux. You can Google it, and you put it on your computer. It works again for laptops and desktops. And once you turn it on, you don't have to deal with it again. And it dims the screen at night. It essentially it takes the blue light out of the screen, which is the frequency of light that really keeps you up and suppresses melatonin. So simply putting Flux on your computer will make it effectively easier to wind down at night. And then Apple, on the new version of their iPhone software, has something called night shift mode. So most people don't even realize that it's on there. And if you go into your settings, you can find it pretty easily. And again, that does the same thing for your iPhone and iPad, and that takes the blue light out of the screen at night. So effectively, it makes the screen a little bit yellower, and that makes it softer on your eyes, so it's easier to wind down.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know about either of those. I'm sitting here looking at my iPhone right now. I'm just baffled. This is so cool.
Yeah, and I mean, those are two completely free, completely easy things to do that can really help the body, like I said, wind down at night. Again, it's without getting too technical, we make melatonin at night, which is really important for a lot of reasons. It's not just to make us tired, but if we're staring at blue light, our body doesn't make that melatonin. So again, those are two super easy things. And then again, prioritizing to have things. Maybe it's setting a TV turn-off time. I personally do that. For me, it's about 9 o'clock, or actually it kind of depends on the season. So I don't really watch TV after the sun is set, with a few exceptions. But again, for a junior tennis player, it's 9 p.m. TV turn-off time. We all, most people have access to DVRs or Hulu or Netflix or whatever. So there's no real need to stay up late watching TV aside from it's enjoyable. But so setting that turn-off time, and then maybe it's at 9 p.m. I'm going to stop doing work. I'm going to stop watching TV. I'm going to take a shower, wind down, and go to sleep. Establishing a real, some real guidelines that might be a little bit tricky at first, but I think will really be beneficial for health and sleep and tennis performance and everything.
So interesting.
So that's,
I wonder if Xbox is going to install one of those, or the gaming systems, if they're going to install.
Yeah, that's a good
some
question.
sort of app like that.
Actually, I hadn't even thought about that. I mean, it does change the color, so my hunch would be no, but who knows? So that's a huge piece of things. So if someone could be sleeping better, they're going to just do better in school. They're going to feel less tired. The grades will improve. Their tennis will improve. It's a win all the way around. But I understand the implementation can be tricky. Again, I think that's why the few easy things can go a long way, hopefully. And then, so then we could talk about general nutrition, because when people think about sports nutrition, usually the first question that comes up is, what should I eat before I play? What should I eat, after I play? Whatever, these kind of things. But if someone now that we're assuming the person is sleeping well, what they eat on a regular basis, so their breakfast, lunch, dinner, and that kind of thing, has a huge effect. So if
if they're eating terrible food or not eating enough or whatever at these regular meals, then it's really tricky to kind of make up for that by just eating the right thing right before tennis. So we're talking about kind of getting these kids fueled properly through the day and as a habit.
Can I ask a general question?
Of
Are
course.
you a proponent of 3 meals plus snacks, or are you a proponent of like 6 small meals through the day or grazing type of eating behaviors?
Yeah, generally I think 3 meals and a couple of snacks are better. Definitely the research shows that 6 small meals are definitely not better than 3 meals or 3 meals plus a couple of snacks. In some in some ways maybe it's roughly the same, but in some ways it is better to have 3 meals. And again, maybe 3 meals and a couple of snacks. Now, of course, there's a lot of variation, or variables, like if you're playing tennis, if you have a practice, or the timing of that stuff. But I think having 3 solid meals is generally a good thing. And again, that's not just my opinion, but that's kind of been pretty supported by research.
Great. Okay. So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought.
No, that's okay. Please.
I think it's kind of an important starting point. So. Yeah,
and then, just as kind of an aside, with people that want to graze all day, I mean, they're always looking for, quote, healthy snacks, but I mean, you wind up eating probably more maybe questionable foods that wouldn't be as good as as compared with having just 3 solid meals of good food. So, but with that, so I think the easiest thing, and I know a big thing with teenagers is it's hard to implement this stuff. So with everything that I do and the things that we're talking about, I really have in mind what's doable, what's sustainable for the kids. Like spending 5 years with the college tennis players was so valuable for me from a coaching standpoint, from a tennis standpoint, from an experience standpoint. But knowing, okay, these are, a little bit older, older teenagers, so 18 to 22-year-olds, but they still, all these habits that can be hard to break of, eating, maybe candy bars or not skipping meals, or all these habits that kind of, we don't want to encourage. But it's interesting to see, okay, I can tell them all these things, but what are they actually going to listen to and what are they going to do? So I think an important aspect of this is to get them to understand why these things are important. So if someone's kind of running out of gas during a long tennis match or a long practice, and maybe not just once, but repeatedly, and then we say, okay, like tennis practice is at 1:30 p.m. and you're running out of gas by halfway through it. What's going on? And I ate breakfast, and then it's like, well, did you eat lunch? No, I had class. You kind of put 2 and 2 together that there's a disconnect between you're not putting fuel in your body and you're running out of energy, right? So then it's working together to say, okay, well, you have a class up until 20 minutes before practice, so you need to bring a sandwich and an apple with you. Plan ahead a little bit and eat that after, or what I mean. So things like that. I think you really need to make the connection of what you put in and how you feel. So when the kids can kind of start to connect with that, I think that's when they'll get a little bit more bought into these things. So generally speaking, reducing processed foods, that's kind of an obvious one, but I think it's important. And I like to kind of emphasize like the difference between like a piece of fish and fish sticks, right? These are completely different things. So a piece of chicken and chicken McNuggets, right? So people kind of think meat or fish and that's it. But right. You're laughing because it sounds obvious, but I think my experience has shown me it's like, okay, you really need to spell this out sometimes.
Sure.
And there's better choices. And honestly, even something like potato chips, I try to encourage people to have some discretion. So like the Cool Ranch Doritos with like tons and tons of artificial flavors and colors and things, as opposed to like a bag of potato chips that is just potatoes, olive oil, and salt. These are kind of in the same category, but you can still even make better decisions with a little bit of background knowledge and understanding. So I think one of the biggest things I see with juniors, with teenagers, athletes, and particularly the girls, is actually undereating. It's kind of amazing to me sometimes how much they undereat by and still function, but then they're not functioning at their optimal level, right? But that becomes a new baseline, so that's just kind of, they think that's what it is. So
Getting enough protein. So this is a big one, and you want it roughly distributed evenly through the day. So that means, the typical breakfast might be like, let's say it's waffles, a cereal, an orange juice, or toast in the morning, and then maybe a small sandwich at lunch, and then most people have the majority of the protein at dinner. That's kind of like just all ages of people. That's kind of the what they fall into. But it's really much better off from a health standpoint, an athletic standpoint, a muscle retention and building standpoint, to have the protein distributed evenly through the day in roughly, every 3 to 4 hours roughly. So that means breakfast could be, include some eggs, include some chicken. Greek yogurt is a really good protein source in the morning. That's usually, again, breakfast is kind of the trickiest one because that's just where people traditionally get the least protein. So I emphasize that a lot. I guess speaking of breakfast, I do definitely believe breakfast is the most important meal of the day, particularly for the teenagers. There's so much research showing that when teenagers who either typically skip breakfast or typically have like a high carb, low protein breakfast, when they're given a higher protein breakfast, they are less hungry. They're less likely to snack even later in the day. They're going to focus better. I mean, it's kind of a win all the way around. So again, that then comes back to a little bit of knowledge, knowing, okay, I need to include protein at breakfast, and a little bit of planning. So I know, school starts so early that the Greek yogurt is such a great go-to because most people like the taste, and it's got a good amount of protein, a decent amount of protein. One side note about Greek yogurt, for example, is I would urge the plain flavors as opposed to the plain ones as opposed to the flavored ones. If you compare the same brand, but one is plain and one is flavored, you'll see a huge difference in the sugar content. So maybe someone could add a little bit of their own honey or berries or something. That'd be preferable to buying the flavored blueberry kind. But I suppose either one would be superior to just having like no breakfast or a piece of toast or something for breakfast.
So, we Americans have this whole idea of, the whole waffle, pancake, muffin kind of breakfast, high in carbs and low in pretty much everything else, except for sugar.
Yeah.
High in sugar, high in carbs, overall
yeah,
carbs.
Maybe high in fat, yeah.
So, I keep reading about how we need to kind of open our mind up, and it's funny because I remember reading an article about John Isner when he first went on tour, and one of the toughest things for him was breakfast, because when you're traveling around the world, breakfast looks very different from our American version, and he was having a really hard time kind of wrapping his head around eating fish or turkey at breakfast time. But the rest of the world does that. We're kind of the only country that is hooked on this whole, starchy, sugary breakfast thing. So can you maybe, other than the Greek yogurt or in addition to the Greek yogurt, maybe talk about some other high protein sources that, especially when families are traveling to tournaments, because that's when, talk about getting tricky. You're stuck with hotel buffets that your only protein source is really bacon and sausage. I don't think that's what you're talking about.
No, exactly. And again, that with my time with the college players traveling and in those kind of hotels and having those hotel buffets, and it's really tough. I guess a few thoughts on that. One is, if you do have access to quote like dinner foods, to kind of just try an open mind. So many people, it's really mental. Most people will enjoy breakfast for dinner, like people like scrambled eggs for dinner or whatever. But there's no reason you can't have dinner for breakfast. And so, I know that's kind of not what you're asking, but that there's definitely, that's just kind of a mindset switch that you can go, wow, I can have. For me, one of my typical breakfasts is about a half pound of ground beef with sautéed vegetables, and I feel fantastic. So that there's, on one hand, you can kind of switch your thinking, but as you said, in the U.S. especially, the hotels aren't, and that's not even an option. So eggs, of course, are a great source of nutrition and protein. As a quick side on that, whole eggs. So egg whites are you're missing about 3/4 of the valuable nutrition when someone just does egg whites compared to a whole egg. And cholesterol, like dietary cholesterol, is just not a problem, not the problem that people thought it once was. Eggs. Eggs and Greek yogurt, I mean, are kind of the top, or regular yogurt. So the difference between Greek yogurt and regular yogurt is that Greek yogurt is typically higher in protein, much higher in protein. And then that's where, again, planning ahead comes in handy. So you can bring things. Beef jerky, it's a good one, and I'm not talking about Slim Jims, but like a decent beef jerky, you can get it like a Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. That's great for traveling. You could bring, depending on if you're driving or if you're flying somewhere, you could certainly bring food for the next day, deli meat. So having some sliced turkey, or you can get it in whatever city you're in. Get a half pound or a pound of turkey, and either have that as a snack. You can bring that to the breakfast buffet with you, just to get in that protein. And it doesn't mean you have to eat like the whole, a pound of turkey, but having 3 to 4 ounces of turkey with your breakfast will really it does so many good things. And even, when appropriate, something like a protein powder, so like a whey protein that, again, you're just adding to, maybe you do want to have oatmeal and fruit at from the hotel buffet, but then you just add some of your own protein. So you can mix it into your oatmeal, or you just have a side, protein drink.
And you mentioned specifically whey protein, and I know there are all sorts of different types of protein powders out there. Personally, I use a hemp protein powder that I order from Amazon, but it doesn't have any flavor, and I really like it. It's not grainy. But there's whey protein, there's pea protein, there's soy protein. So from a nutrition standpoint, you're saying the whey protein is the way to go for these athletes?
For breakfast, actually, let's take a step back. Having a variety of protein sources in general throughout your day and throughout your week is a good thing. The difference in these proteins, the main difference is if most people have heard the term amino acids. So think of it like the Lego blocks or the building blocks of protein. So if you consume 25 grams of protein, whether it's from, wherever it's from, chicken or beef or whey or hemp, it's made up of a mixture of these 20 different amino acids in varying amounts. So each type of protein has kind of a different set of Lego blocks that have built it up. Okay, and so the difference, again, then is for building muscle. So like after a workout, whey is pretty much the king of rebuilding muscle. And it's because it has one particular amino acid that's really good at that. So its profile, it's kind of each protein, you could say, has a unique fingerprint. And the fingerprint of whey is really beneficial for after workout. So as a breakfast protein, you could certainly have whey. You could have hemp, pea protein, and some of these like vegetarian blends can work well. So the most critical time that you would probably want whey is after a workout for someone trying to recover well and rebuild muscle. But as a adjunct breakfast protein, it can you can and probably should vary your protein sources.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that.
Yeah. And then so that's, we talked about breakfast. So we talked about sleeping. So now our teenage athletes are sleeping better. They're going to get some protein at breakfast, and hopefully they'll get a reasonable amount of protein at lunch and dinner, and then carbohydrates. That's kind of the big, the next kind of big, topic I guess we could talk about. Generally speaking, we're always getting energy from a mixture of fat and carbohydrates. And generally speaking, when we're sitting, like we're all sitting here right now listening, we're relying on a higher percentage and a lower percentage of carbohydrates. Then as we start exercising, if we were to stand up, start walking, jogging, running up to a full sprint, we would rely increasingly on carbohydrates. So we're starting to burn more carbohydrates as our heart rate goes up and our exercise intensity goes up. So what that means then is, you kind of think of the phrase earning your carbs. So for someone who sits maybe in an office all day, or a kid that doesn't do sports and plays video games, they don't need a whole lot of carbohydrate. The person who is, exercising at a high intensity, having a hard tennis match or practice, or a soccer player, they will be burning carbs because they're spending more time at those high intensities. So that really needs to inform. So if you have two kids, siblings, and one is a tennis player and one is, a piano player, their difference, there's going to be a big difference in their carbohydrate needs. And that varies, can even really vary from day to day. You don't necessarily always have to micromanage it from day to day, but generally speaking, again, the more active and more high-intensity exercise you do, the big difference in your calorie needs are going to be from the carbohydrate.
Interesting. So that makes it tricky for families, too, where the kids are involved in various types of activities. And, so again, it goes back to that whole thing that you said at the beginning of you've got to plan.
Yeah. And I should maybe clarify that it doesn't mean, of course, they need, we're talking about different meals, but maybe it's the active kid needs 2 scoops of rice or potatoes, and the sedentary sibling might need, half or one, or, it can be kind of subtle like that. But yeah, supporting your body, and especially with growing kids, like I said before, I see so many kids not eating enough, and they come usually I guess I didn't really mention too much. I do, as a dietitian, I have a private practice, so I work with people. I do sometimes work with teams and speak to teams and things, but my main thing is to work individually. And so the teenagers I usually wind up seeing are the ones that just have really low energy, or this something going on. And most of the time, they're just you get them eating more and on a regular basis, and things kind of fix themselves. So it's supporting your daily exercise and your growing body's needs by getting enough nutrients. And so, a lot of times that will kind of take care of itself, but that is kind of the difference that maybe a parent might observe between the two kids. So again, maybe a lot of times siblings will both play sports or both not play sports, but that's kind of what's going on behind the difference, because the difference in what they're burning is really in the carbohydrates.
Right. So as a parent, you've mentioned several factors that are affected by poor nutrition for our kids. And, so if it's me and watching my kid, what am I looking for? Kids are moody anyway, and especially when they're going through puberty and adolescence. So mood isn't always a necessary indicator for nutrition or sleep. There's so many factors that could play into that. Are there really specific things that we parents can look out for to say, oh my gosh, my kid needs to be eating better?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say, for one, not making it through a sports practice. Just really, if a kid is just completely running out of gas, it's one thing to be tired, of course, after playing tennis or any other sport, but to really just be hitting the wall and just feeling like they're just, out of gas completely, that's an indicator. For girls, and this is a big one, not having a monthly cycle or not having a regular cycle. That's not something that this isn't, talked about as much or enough, because, many coaches are males, and maybe there's I don't want to say kind of, they're uncomfortable. Yeah, that's where
they're uncomfortable.
So, but this is a really big thing, and so you could think of it as a canary in a coal mine. If a girl actually the age where girls start getting their period in athletes is actually oftentimes, or I should say, the average age is higher than non-athletes, and this relates to what's called energy availability. So how many calories or how much energy your body has to kind of, quote, do its thing after your exercise needs are taken care of. So what I mean by that is, let's say a girl could easily burn 1,000 calories during a tennis practice, so maybe a 14 or 15-year-old girl, and she eats 2,000 calories a day, and she burns 1,000 during sports practice. So that leaves 1,000 calories for her body to repair and grow. And what's left over for the body is too low on a regular basis. The girl will stop getting her period, or won't start. So this is really important, because it's a real indicator, and it can lead to many other issues down the road, most notably lowered bone density. And it's really important, because bone density accrual is really all happening in the teenage years, and after that, it's you're just maintaining it. Can't really build much bone density. So getting enough energy intake is super important, again, for everyone. But again, this is the biggest sign, and I guess I've kind of mentioned it a couple of times, but I want to stress it enough that girls should be having a regular cycle. And if they're not, a lot of times they're just getting contraceptives prescribed to even that out. But that can mask the problem. So definitely working with a healthcare practitioner, you see a registered dietitian, a physician, and again, as the first step is usually to increase energy intake and or decrease activity, and it may kind of fix itself. The ship may be righted, but if it doesn't, again, it's an indicator that something is off.
That's so interesting because, I mean, when I was growing up, it was just kind of the accepted, attitude that if you're a high-level female athlete, you don't menstruate. That's just part and parcel of training and performing at a high level. So that's definitely, you're saying, we've learned that that's not necessarily the case, and it's definitely a bad thing if that happens, and we need to fix it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's pretty shocking to me. The more people I work with and the more I learn. I mean, I've had dancers or people who, like former ballerinas, saying their coach would say, if you're getting your period, you're eating too much, or carbs are for when you're older, or something. It's just terrible things that it's a big problem. So there's something called the female athlete triad, and now it's actually kind of been thought to be. It doesn't just affect females, but what that is three things that often kind of run together, and it's, as I mentioned, it's energy availability or not eating enough for your bodies to take care of your body's needs, and that's often related to menstrual dysfunction, and then followed by low bone mineral density. So oftentimes, just simply putting more in food intake, increasing that, will then fix the menstrual dysfunction, which will then have an effect, because it's the estrogen that affects the bone mineral density. So they all kind of relate together. But again, if someone's not eating enough, if it's all happening, then it can lead to a lot of potential health, and these can be way down the line. So someone, when they're older, a greater risk of bone fractures and things that are years away, but nonetheless very, very serious.
Right, and it's an issue that accumulates over time. So it's kind of like sun damage. If you bake in the sun in your teens, then when you get to be my age, all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, now I know why my mom told me to put sunscreen on.
Right. And actually, I guess. Well, I was going to say. So while on the topic of for the girls, this is something that's just really fascinating to me, because I worked with girls for a long time, and it's again not talked about enough. But for girls that are having a regular cycle, their needs actually can change throughout the cycle. It's based on their hormones. The fluctuations in hormones actually affect some performance variables, and also most notably like hydration needs. And so the research is really interesting on this, and there's a lot of actually contrasting research, and the reason is because it's very difficult to study because there's so much variation in hormone levels, even within the same woman from month to month, and then among different women. So there's we know what generally happens on a textbook kind of cycle, but many times the front half of the back half is the front half is longer, front half of the month. So this can change study outcomes. But for practical use, I think the most important thing for people to be aware of, for women that are girls that are having a normal cycle, and by normal I should say 27 to 30, 31 or 32 days, is the mid-luteal phase, which refers to days about 19 through 24. That time, that 4 or 5, 6 days, is going to be, it's when both progesterone and estrogen are elevated. And the practical effects are that it's actually, you'll tend to be more likely to cramp. So it's their fluid needs and their sodium needs would increase during those 5 days. And I'll give you a quick story. One of the college girls I worked with, I wasn't there on this particular day, but there was a tournament, and it's a good player, and she just had all kinds of cramping issues on this one day, like muscle cramps. And then she was actually okay the next day. And afterwards, a week or two later, I was kind of explaining some of this stuff to her, and I just based on, kind of what she was telling me from her symptoms and how she was feeling, and when she started feeling better, like I said, well, did you get your period on this day, like the next Monday or whatever? And actually, it turns out that was the case. So she was in that period, in those few days where your fluid retention actually goes down. So your blood volume goes down. Your heart rate actually will be elevated 6 to 7 beats at the same work intensity. Your body temperature also is up in that. So at ovulation, I guess I should just take a quick step back and explain your body temperature. So on a typical 28-day cycle, there's kind of broadly think of it as I call it the front half and the back half. It's just easy to think of the follicular phase and the luteal phase, and in the middle is ovulation. On day 14, roughly, is ovulation, and your body temperature will go up a small but significant amount and stay elevated for about 7 to 10 days or so. So that means then if it's hot out, the girl's body temperature is already is starting off higher than quote baseline. Mm-hmm. So they're going to be more heat sensitive. So of course your body temperature goes up during exercise. So cooling your body both during and after exercise becomes more important during the luteal phase. So that's a small thing. So if it is hot out, making sure to take appropriate fluids. But then again, during those 5 days, you don't actually absorb the fluid as well because there's changes relating to the hormones. So consuming more fluid and with more salt during that week or so is going to be really important for the tennis player playing in hot weather.
That's so interesting. I have never heard that before about correlating the increase in body temperature to fluid uptake. And wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's understudied, but it's certainly no doubt been studied. Yeah. I mean, and a lot of people probably feel it kind of intuitively, but so now if you're thinking of if I'm a tennis coach and I working with girls, I'd want to know. And having being sensitive to it's not to the
privacy.
Being sensitive with the players, but I think so. Yeah. I guess maybe to take it actually a step further back, I think girls should know when their cycle is. So there's actually some really great free apps. There's one called Glow that I have people use. So you should know where you are in the cycle. It'll show you, and they're easy to use and they're free, and you'd want to have an idea where you are just for general health. I mean, again. Talking back to thinking back to the menstrual dysfunction, periods longer than 35 days, that's called oligoamenorrhea. So if you want to see where your cycle is coming, and that these apps can help you track that. But again, if you're competing and you're around days 19 through 24, I would want to take some extra measures. And again, that would mean using extra salt before, during, and after the match to hydrate better. Cooling your body, again, becomes more important. So make sure you have cold water, maybe cold towels, like on your neck, like on changeovers, and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's some other nuanced things, but those are, I would say, the most important or the most easy to implement, and that will give you the most benefit. So girls should be aware, and like I said, coaches to provide the players, maybe having extra salt around or whatever it is.
Interesting. And so what about for boys? Because, I mean, obviously the menstruation piece is irrelevant when we're talking about the boys, but are there cyclical things that happen for boys too?
I don't know about cyclical in the same way, but for guys that are not eating enough or eating the right things, you would see poor recovery between practices, or if they're doing strength training, really being sore longer than maybe their teammates. Again, not making it through practices and just feeling like they either are just completely tired or completely out of gas. Not sleeping well. So again, there's so many factors that go into sleep. If you've been staring at the screen, if you're stimulated, if they're texting and getting some kind of emotional adrenaline rush from a text or something, that there's that. But if you are, when we think about quote, overtraining or undereating, your sleep, if they start waking up in the middle of the night to pee more when they don't usually do that, these are signs that they might not be eating enough for how much they're burning. And as far as maybe struggling to build muscle the way, again, maybe compared to teammates. There's so many moving parts in there, but those are, I would say, some things to kind of look for. Recovery and making it through long practices and matches.
So, okay, let's shift gears a little bit and get to that piece on, because we've only got about 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure we really hit on this. The before match, during match, and after match nutrition needs, and how that looks during practice weeks and how that looks during competition, whether it's a tournament or, the high school season or the collegiate season, when things are gearing up, to full force.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess first we should qualify it by, if we assume we're talking about junior players, but at a fairly high competency and so playing pretty hard, high-level physical matches,
yes,
you could say. So I would say practice and playing shouldn't be all that different because, why would you do one thing? You want to, assuming it's not a technical practice, I mean, of course, sometimes if you're just working on serves or kind of doing more technique, it's going to be perhaps lower intensity. But if we're talking about a high-intensity practice, generally, so if we talk about, let's say, before, you want to go in with a full tank of gas. And that can, and I kind of stay vague on that because some people can eat right before they play and some people just don't want anything in their stomachs. So there's a lot of individual variability. If you're athlete or if you don't like having, want an empty stomach, then you might have to eat 2 or 3 hours beforehand, but then maybe you can have something small right before you play. So maybe it's like half a banana or something, or maybe a little sports drink. If you're, again, you don't mind eating right before, dates are another good one that you kind of just have as a quick snack to add some gas to the tank. Coming in hydrated is a big one. And so, of course, everyone knows, drinking water, but you can't overdrink. You can't overhydrate because your kidneys will just flush that out. So if I have a match at 2 o'clock and I say, okay, I'm going to drink a gallon of water at noon, I'm probably going to hydrate appropriately and then just pee most of it out. On the court, and this is where it gets into, there's a lot of variability, but generally speaking, we know that having some carbohydrate will help sports performance that lasts about longer than about an hour. So if you're on the court for 2 hours, plus, some matches can go 2.5, 3 hours, having some kind of carbohydrate, and that could be sports drink, it could be banana, it could be a bar or chews, will generally help performance. And that's fairly well established and has been for a number of years. Drinking water on the court, it can be appropriate, but for a heavy sweater, I would suggest something either adding salt to water or having a sports drink. And actually my problem with most sports drinks is that it's actually they're too low in sodium for someone who is, again, sweating a lot. Now, again, this is where you get so much variability. Some people sweat maybe half a liter of fluid per hour, and some people could sweat like 3+ liters per hour. So that's going to be huge, individual variation there. A simple thing, simple but a little bit tricky to implement, is to weigh yourself before and after tennis. And if you shouldn't lose more than about 2% of your body weight in fluids. That's of course, it's not convenient to have a scale at the tennis court, but if you can manage that, that's a really simple way to check what's going on. You mentioned earlier.
Is it also true, Jeff? Is it also true that some people are salty sweaters or saltier sweaters than others?
Yeah, and that's exactly the perfect segue. So there are, quote, saltier sweaters and less saltier sweaters. The interesting thing is, well, an easy way is if someone's wearing a black shirt and they have salt rings or salt lines on the shirt, then they're a pretty salty sweater, and they're going to be more likely to cramp, and they'll be more likely to do better when you add more salt in their drinks and on their food. One of the adaptations to heat, so now that this time of year is particularly tricky because you might get a hot day followed by a cool day followed by these random kind of weather changing days. Mm-hmm. If it's hot all the time, you adapt. It takes about 1 to 2 weeks to adapt to the heat. And what I mean by adapt is you actually start sweating sooner, so your body becomes better at cooling itself, and you sweat less salty. So the same person, if you measure their sweat in the middle of winter versus the middle of summer, they're going to have less salt in their sweat in the summer. Okay, so but again, what that means is they're saltier. They're going to lose more electrolytes when they're not acclimated to the heat. And so this time of year, again, might have a week of cool weather, and then all of a sudden you can have a really hot day, and that's when I might expect to see more people cramping. Also, for tennis players traveling, so if someone lives in, Wyoming and they go to play a tournament in the winter in Florida, well, then they're going to have to take some extra precautions, and ideally maybe it's spending a little bit of time like in the sauna, actually a little bit each day before their trip, and taking some extra salt when they're down there, again, in their food and in their drinks. And the reason I keep mentioning the salt in the drinks, so water with salt in it will actually hydrate you better than plain water alone. And so, if I sweat out, let's say like a liter of water during a practice, and I want to rehydrate myself, and I drink a liter of water, I actually will not be fully rehydrated. I'll have to drink like 1.5 to almost 2 liters of plain water to get back to even. Whereas if I was to drink water with the appropriate amount of salt in it, I could drink 1 to 1.5 liters and much less fluid to get back to even, because then it's going to be absorbed better.
How do you know how much salt to add?
Yeah, that's a good question, and so that's where the utility of sports drinks, a well-made sports drink, can come in handy. I know the most popular, of course, is Gatorade. Gatorade actually makes an endurance one, so Gatorade Endurance is a powder, which has more sodium. And for tennis players playing on hot days and who are heavy sweaters, I think that's a much better product. Simply adding a little bit of salt, like if someone has a bottle, just putting a pinch of salt in it, it shouldn't feel like you're drinking the ocean, but maybe just barely enough to taste it. I know a lot of my girls didn't like it. If I would kind of urge them to do that, of course. And some people don't like it. You kind of get used to it. If it really tastes bad, you almost certainly put too much salt in. We certainly could measure it, but I know that's not very practical for people. I would say you'd want about a half a gram, but that, again, of sodium, that doesn't really translate to anything for people. So if you just simply putting a shake, a pinch or a shake, just enough to okay, there's a little bit of something in there, but it doesn't really affect you too much. I think that's a safe, a simple rule of thumb that if it's hot, and again, even if you're drinking regular Gatorade, I just might add a pinch, or if you have one of those grinders from Trader Joe's, just kind of two shakes there, something like that. It's going to help the cause. Again,
you have to be careful too. Just speaking from personal experience, if you add too much, it can cause severe nausea. So that's not what you want to happen either.
Right. Yeah. No. I know I kind of say that cautiously. So yeah, you want to be smart about it, and just a little bit. And again, if it's too much, it's a bad idea. So maybe I'm sure you can err on the lower side for sure. But if someone's has problems cramping, this is probably a good option. Again, or not worrying about it in the drinks and just having saltier foods, so snacking on pretzels. Adding just liberally salt, adding salt to taste, but liberally, especially on tournament days. So if we're talking about multiple matches in one day, now this is, and we only have a few minutes, but in between matches, really repleting your salt and your carbohydrates and getting some protein is important. So it depends. Now, if you might have 20 minutes rest between matches, especially if it's like a singles followed by a doubles match. But if you're playing 2 tournament matches, you might have like a morning and afternoon. If you have the time, I think Chipotle is a great option. Especially when you're on the road, getting some rice, a bowl with rice and chicken or whatever, and some vegetables, and then maybe even adding a little bit of salt. I think that really replenishes things well. I think chocolate milk is a great option. I know that tends to be a contentious topic. Chocolate milk will rehydrate very well and give you some carbohydrate and protein. There is sugar in it, but if someone is, as we mentioned, playing at a high intensity or playing tennis for a couple hours, their gas tank has been effectively depleted. If your gas tank is depleted, putting the carbohydrate or chocolate milk back in is fine. If someone that doesn't deplete their gas tank by sitting around playing video games all day, overfilling the gas tank is real when the problems happen. So if someone's carb stores are full and you put in more sugar, that is definitely not advisable. That's see the health problem. But for athletes who are depleting their gas tank, putting in Gatorade or chocolate milk can be very beneficial.
What's your thought on coconut water?
Coconut water is good from a general daily use standpoint, but it's not good on the tennis court. And the reason is because it's got a lot of potassium and very little sodium, and that's actually the opposite of what we want in a sports drink. So we want higher sodium because that's what you're really losing in your sweat, and a little bit of potassium is okay, but it's again kind of opposite of what we're sweating and what we want to replenish. So for a snack, again when you're just kind of around the house or at school or something, it's fine. But on the tennis court, it's not favorite. It's not. No, I wouldn't advise it.
And what about? I mean, there's so many sports drinks on the market now besides Gatorade and its lesser brother Powerade. And I live in Atlanta and Coke Town, so I have to be careful about that. But there's so many powders out there and, ready-made drinks. I mean, how, as a parent, when we're, shopping around for this stuff, what should we be looking for? Is there that ultimate balance?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and that's where, I guess meeting with someone like myself or someone that, similar that can understand this. I mean, I have a spreadsheet that I've created of literally every sports drink and gel and chew and sports product that I can compare each ingredient, the calories and the sugar and the carbohydrate. And so, I mean, I think broadly for a teenage athlete exercising at high intensities, Gatorade is fine. And again, my only issue is maybe the sodium. So if your child is a heavy sweater, then you could buy the Gatorade endurance powder. And I think that I think it's popular not just because of marketing, because I think it's it's fine. I mean, I know that sounds maybe heresy to some people, but I mean it works well. It is well studied. I think it actually used to be saltier originally, and they've kind of maybe changed some things for taste. But again, it's not for everyone. It's not to be snacked on while you're sipped on while you're playing video games. It's a sports drink, and you really have to earn it. But and many of these teenage athletes or children of people listening are working very hard on the court. So you have to use some discretion to say, have I earned my carbs? And am I working very hard? And I know that's so it's subjective, but I think that's the best approach.
Great. So I want to give you an opportunity, because we're down to our last 5 minutes or so. I want to let you talk about your new book and talk about how people can find you and reach out to you if they have questions specific to their children.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that, and I appreciate you having me on. My website is eatsleep.fit, so that's www.eatsleep.fit. And I'm really excited because I have just come out with a video course and an ebook on tennis nutrition. So what I did, taking the years of experience as a player, as a coach, working with teenage athletes and pro athletes, I guess we haven't mentioned, but I do work with a number of guys on the tour. I wanted to make, there's so many, you see a blog, tips on tennis nutrition, 7 tips or foods you should eat and things, but to really understand it, I think anyone that's listened this far can know there's so many moving parts and so many caveats. So what I did with the book and the course, and I guess that they are similar, and some people just prefer to read things in more of a book format, and it is available on Kindle also, and some people would prefer to kind of see and listen. So the information is very similar, but just in different formats and for people to digest. And I really broke down each subject, so talked more about sleep, daily food choices, what to eat before, during, and after you play, the unique needs of females. I really go into more detail with that, and really took the science and put it in easy to implement and hopefully easy to understand. So you don't need a science background to understand this, but I want you to give you sound advice in ways to kind of understand what's going on. To say then, okay, I'm burning more carbs, or my child is needing more of this energy, how much they should take in during a day. Kind of want to give you a broad overview to really understand how to put into practice some sound decisions. And this can have far-reaching effects, so you can see improvements in tournament results, and even leading into college scholarships. I know that's really important. So going into a school and having your nutrition already dialed in, you'll be so far ahead of many of your teammates who just are clueless and, skipping meals and things like that, and being able to have good energy and understanding the importance of good sleep and good foundation will really give you tools that you can use really your whole life, but particularly that can be of benefit on the tennis court. So that's all available. You can see that on my website. And I also do, of course, work with people on an individual basis via Skype in person. I'm in Santa Monica, California, but I do have a number of clients that I talk to remotely. Talk to guys. So my tennis players, guys on the tour, I'll even go in detail with jet lag, how to, and I talk about this in the book and the video, how to recover quicker from jet lag. So if you're going to a tournament and you only have a day or two to adjust to a new time zone, what are the steps you should do to speed up that process? And that can be really, really important, especially people going to Europe or to Asia.
Right.
So,
that's fantastic. Well, poor you having to live in Santa Monica. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, it's rough.
So they can reach out to you through your website, and I expect your email is on there. There's a way to contact you directly.
Yeah, if you just click the contact, yeah, absolutely.
And you're on Facebook.
Yeah, you can find me on Facebook. My email is, feel free to email me directly. It's RD, as in registered dietitian, RD@trifitla.com. So, I'd love to chat about this stuff and hear from you guys. And any questions also, I mean, my background with, in coaching and working with people, it's kind of let me see what are the things people are curious about and what are the questions you need answered. But I'm always, open to seeing, okay, what are the things people struggle with, so I can figure out how to solve them and how to help more people.
That's fantastic. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for being on the show, and sorry about the technical difficulties early on.
No problem.
I'm hoping that we're good here. I guess I'll find out once we get done, but I do appreciate it. And to my listeners, thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you'll reach out to Jeff with any nutrition concerns or questions, and I'm so glad you really pushed the sleep stuff today, Jeff, because that's such an ignored part of the equation oftentimes, and, especially for...
Geico presents sharing versus oversharing. Earlier this week, Claire Tippins shared a princess nickname generator, 3 pictures of her dog wearing a tutu, and 2 online quizzes, including, what candy is your dream castle made of? Claire, your sharing has tipped the sugar scale and turned into oversharing. But have no fear, princess. Geico has something worth sharing with your internet kingdom, like how you could save hundreds on your car insurance just by visiting geico.com. No magic wand required. Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.